Welcome back to Dobber Prospects Radio. This would be episode 65, and it's early in the season, and I thought I'd just squeeze in a little quick sort of bonus episode. No guest today, just going to ramble on about a few things. Thought I'd do a review of the CHL scoring leaders, so the top 4 or 5 from across the CHL, the Q, the O, and the Dub. I have some thoughts on Shane Wright and his first season with the Kingston Frontenacs. Then I thought I'd do a little bit of a recap on Hughes versus Kakko and how their season has started, how they're looking, and it's not going great. Are they busts? And then for all y'all in real deep fantasy leagues, I thought I'd do some like 0% Fantrax owned, really deep prospects who are way under the radar, but absolutely worth putting on your watch list or maybe even squeezing onto your roster. I own all of these guys. So let's get right at it. Let's start with the OHL. And leading the O is none other than Quinten Byfield, who's draft eligible for 2020. He's playing with Sudbury. He is pushing hard for consideration for first overall in the upcoming NHL draft in Montreal. He's got 2 points per game, 20 points in 10 games, 8 goals, 12 assists. He's drawing comparisons to Eric Lindros all over the place. I really like this guy. I think he's a fantastic player. He's NHL ready next season. He's going to be playing for Canada, Team OHL in the Canada-Russia series. Look for him to be a probable for the World Junior roster this coming Christmas. So that might be a great chance for anyone who's not in Ontario that doesn't have access to OHL games to get their first real glimpse at Quinten Byfield. He looked pretty dominant for Canada at the Hlinka. He's looked dominant in the OHL this year, and he's a legitimate contender for first overall. The season is still pretty early in the draft year, 10 games in, so it's too soon to announce him as a contender for first overall or anoint Lafrenier first, but this is a player who I'm really excited about and don't think I'll be able to acquire him in a draft this coming summer, but hopefully. He's followed up by Arthur Kaliev, first round, or was it second round pick from last year's draft. Goal scorer for the Hamilton Bulldogs. He's got 1 point behind Byfield, 19 points in 9 games, so just over 2 points a game. 10 goals, 9 assists. He's a sniper. He's a player. Then we got a couple of Maple Leafs cracking this roster. Nick Robertson with Peter and Semyon Der-Arguchintesv also with the Petes, both with 18 points. Nick Robertson, younger brother of Jason. He has 11 goals and 7 assists for the Petes, and SDA has 2 goals and 16 assists. So both players are a little bit on the undersized kind of category. But if you listen to the comments Craig Benton made on his segment here from the draft, that's not a problem necessarily. I still have a little bit of concern with Der-Arguchintesv's size. He's really small. He's kind of weak. And I just really don't see that translating to a higher level of hockey. I hope I'm wrong because he's a dynamic, skilled player. But Robertson is a little bit more formidable. Not a big guy, but not too frail. He keeps his head up. He makes a little bit better all-around plays with the puck. He's a better sniper, as you can see, 11 goals, as opposed to SDA, who's more of a puck distributor. So that's a couple of Petes. The Petes have a really interesting roster this year as well. They've got a number of players who I find fascinating. Go ahead and catch a Petes game if you have the means. A couple more players from the O. At the top of the scoring leaders, Philip Tomasino, Niagara Ice Dogs. I really like this player. Plays with a lot of intensity and compete. He's a 2-point-a-game player. 18 points in 9 games, 7 goals, 11 assists. He's just a fun player to watch. A kind of player you'd like to own on your fantasy team. He gets you a little bit of peripheral stats too because he's pretty aggressive on the forecheck. And then the final player from the OHL is another player I think that's very interesting and you might want to put on your fantasy radar. Ilya Solovyov. Wow. Sorry about that. So he's a defenseman, and he's playing with Saginaw right now. He comes from Belarus. He is in his draft +2 season, so he's 2 years removed from NHL draft. He's got 18 points in 11 games, 1 goal and 17 assists. He was picked in the CHL import draft, 53rd overall. He's a 19-year-old coming from the Belarus. So this is his first season in North America. He's 6'2", 201, so he's got good size. Now, I'm literally just reading this information off Elite Prospects. I haven't seen him play this season yet for Saginaw, but I will keep my eyes open for the big Belarusian defenseman in the O, as he's someone who I think might be gaining a little bit of attention. Moving across to the Dub. The Dub is again dominated at the top of the scoring leaders by overagers. Let's see, we've got Connor Zary, first overall. He's actually draft eligible. He's playing for Kamloops, 16 points in 10 games. He's a late birthday, so he missed last year's draft, so this would be his 3rd season in the Dub. He's a September 25th born player. So that would make him 18 years old already. He's followed up by Bryce Kindrop and Orrin Centazzo. They plays for Everett and Guelph respectively. They both also have 15 points respectively. Kindrop's an overager. He's a possible free agent target at the end of the season or throughout the year. He's a right winger, 6'1", 185, so he's got pretty decent size. And Orrin is a overage player as well. He's a winger, but he's a little undersized. Excuse me, 5'8", 163. So take that for what it's worth. Then we've got another Belarusian player making the top of the CHL scoring. Alexi Protas plays for Prince Albert. He's a draft pick by the Washington Capitals. He's a center, 14 points in 9 games, 6 goals, 8 assists. So the big Belarusian last year had 40 points in 61 games. He's 6'5", 190, so he's a big guy. And he's looking to put up some pretty significant points this year. And then one more player, another overager out of the Dub, James Hamblin from Medicine Hat. He's 14 points so far this season, 11 games, 5 goals, 9 assists. His career stats in the Dub are 271 games, 205 points. So, of course, as you go on in your career, you get a little bit more offensive. He had 70 points in 64 games in 17-18. Last year in 18-19, he eclipsed the point-a-game point with 77 and 67. And he's a little small too, 5'9", 176. So those are your players from the Dub, mostly overagers. In the OHL, it's all drafted players for the most part. And the Q is pretty much Rimouski. 1, 2, and 3 is Alexis Lafrenier and his line mates Cedirc Pare and Dmitri Zavgorodny. So they're 1, 2, 3 in the league in scoring. So starting at the top, Lafrenier, we all know he's the number 1 ranked player. He's got 29 points in 20 games. That's outstanding. The big winger perhaps draws some Vincent Lecavalier type comparisons. We've talked about him before. So his teammates, though, in Rimouski are Cedirc Pare, the center on that line. He's a Boston Bruins property. He was picked by the Bruins in 2017, late in the 6th round, 173rd overall. He's got good size, 6'3", 205 pounds, and he's enjoying playing with Lafrenier on this top line in his final season, his 4th season. He's the captain. He has never had a 20-goal season, and he's got 14 goals in 11 games already this year. So 25 points already. He's about to have a career year, of course. So, like I said in the last episode, when you see players in their final year or at the end of the season have this massive breakout, what's the overall context? Has he been trending in this direction for a long time, or has he just been okay and now he's having a monster season with a super talented player like Lafrenier? I tend to think it might be a little bit of the latter. However, the other player on that line, Dmitri Zavgorodny, had a 6-point night last night. He's a Calgary Flames draft pick, also has 24 points, 8 goals, 16 assists. He had 3 goals and 3 assists last night. Not bad. Calgary picked him in 2018 in the 7th round, 198th overall, a little bit smaller, 5'9", 174. And there's a lot of range in where people see him and where they rank him on Calgary's depth chart. For example, Elite Prospects has him ranked as the 11th overall player on Calgary's depth chart. The Forecaster magazine, which I'm a big fan of, has him ranked the 3rd overall prospect in the Calgary system and 31st overall prospect in the entire NHL. So significantly higher. Dobber Prospects, Joel Henderson has him ranked even lower than Elite Prospects, has him ranked 15th overall. I'm not sure exactly where I would rank him on the Calgary depth chart. There's some factors that go in there. What's your fantasy upside? What's the long-term projection? What's the likelihood of playing in the NHL? What qualifies as a prospect, for the Flames and whatnot. However, I think he would certainly be in my top 10. Probably closer to the 5 range. That's where I see him. Another player who is interesting coming out of the queue is Yegor Sokolov. He plays for Cape Breton. He is in his D+2 season. He's at 24 points in 11 games, 8 goals and 16 assists, so tied with Zavgorodny. So this is his 3rd season in the queue. 143 games played, 118 points are his career totals. He's a big guy, 6'4", 240 pounds, which would lead me to believe why he wasn't drafted. Perhaps he's got some conditioning issues. Certainly very talented, though. The right winger, 24 points in 11 games. But he's pretty heavy. Despite the fact he's 6'4", 240 is still on the heavy side. That's not going to translate well to pro hockey. Wrapping up the scoring leaders in the queue is Raphael Lavoie from the Halifax Mooseheads. Edmonton Oilers picked him this past summer. He's up to 19 points already in 11 games this year. Pretty impressive. Couple of things I don't like about him. One, he's drafted by Edmonton, and I don't like the way they develop their players. And 2, at the draft, talking to a lot of scouts and prospect writers, some of the terms that came up repetitively with in context to Raphael Lavoie were words like compete, consistency, conditioning, or in some cases a lack thereof. So anyway, that's what's happening in the junior ranks right now. I focused on those this week because they started earlier and they're a good 10-pack into the season already. The AHL and a lot of the other leagues are just getting started, and NCAA is only a couple games, so there's not as much sample size to draw on for those leagues. Moving on, speaking of the OHL, sticking with the O, one player who will be of interest, and you're going to hear a lot of on this podcast because he's playing in my hometown now, is the latest player to be granted exceptional status in CHL, and that is Shane Wright. He was picked 1st overall by the Kingston Frontenacs this last spring in the OHL priority selection. This 15-year-old kid is leading the Kingston Frontenacs in scoring. Now, granted, they're a rebuilding team. They're not a contender. They finished last overall last year. They're probably going to be in that same ballpark this year. But he's got a point a game so far as a 15-year-old. 4 goals, 5 assists for 9 points. He's a +2 on a team that lacks goaltending and doesn't play very good defense and lets in about 5 goals a game. He's tied for 3rd overall in the league with rookie scoring, and he is eligible for the 2022 draft. He's just been lights out good for Kingston. As a 15-year-old, this is pretty rare to see performance like that in the OHL for a 15-year-old rookie. We should have a drinking game every time I mention that he's 15 years old. Sorry about that. So what I'm concerned about here is that Kingston is not doing a very good job of surrounding him with talent. They loaded up last year with young players. He's been playing on a line with their 2 top players, Zaid Wisdom and Nick Wong, who are 2 people you've probably never heard of. both eligible for the 20 draft. Nick Wong is a late birthday, so he's a late overage for the draft, you could say. September 17th, he missed it by 2 days. So this is what his line mates are. They just traded away their top defenseman, Billy Constantino, who went undrafted last year, but early in the year was, I think, a B-rated player on the Central Scouting player to watch list. Didn't develop very well in Kingston because they're a terrible team. They traded him to the Sioux for a 4th and 20, a 4th and 21, and a 3rd and 24. I thought that was a light return. So I thought that, the Kingston had an early import pick, and the player that they selected hasn't reported yet, probably won't. So they've had some opportunities to surround Shane Wright with good players. They had Billy Constantino. They could have, they needed to hit a home run at the import draft and select a player that has star potential. They would have also had the opportunity to maybe acquire an impact overage player, maybe reacquire Jacob Paquette, former Kingston Frontenac, who's now in Peterborough. So this is going to be a difficult year for Shane Wright. Kingston's going to be pretty bad. Hopefully they can pull some of these things off next season and have a good high import pick, a good entry draft pick, and select some more players that they can surround Shane Wright with, because he's not going to want to spend his career floundering in a team that's toiling at the bottom of the league. They really need to take advantage of that and make the most of their opportunity with this player, have him embrace the team, use him as a recruiting tool to acquire, players that might not otherwise report to the OHL, but hey, I'm draft eligible and I could play on a team with Shane Wright. That's going to help me out a lot. Look at Dmitri Zavgorodny, what he's doing with Lafrenier and Cedirc Pare. Their value is skyrocketing. So Wright's also selected to the Team Canada U17 tournament, which will be coming up in a few weeks in Czech Republic this year, I believe. So that's an opportunity for him to get a reprieve and place with high-level competition and a team that's competitive. Hopefully that keeps him motivated and invigorated. So more on Shane Wright to come as the season goes on and I get better viewings of him. The next thing I want to talk about was Jack Hughes and Kakko and the start to their season. So all summer long, it was the Hughes versus Kakko, who's going first overall, and these players will be forever linked in their careers. And a lot of people are getting a little bit concerned because they haven't hit the ground running in the NHL. A lot of people were saying Kakko would have a better first season in the NHL because he's older, he's bigger, he's played pro, he's more physically mature, blah, blah, blah. He's 3 games in, he's only got 1 goal. Jack Hughes has played twice as many games and has 0 points for a floundering New Jersey Devils. So, what are we doing with these players? If you own them in your fantasy, are you hitting the panic button? Are you getting really concerned? Like, hey man, I was expecting this guy to be a 60-point player. What's going on? If it's a 1-year pool, you might want to be concerned. But if it is a keeper league, and if you're listening to this podcast, it probably is, you want to just chill, just relax. They're going to be fine. And I have a couple examples of other players who went first overall in their draft and also struggled out of the gate. Going all the way back to Joe Thornton. In his first season, he played 55 games. He only had 3 goals and 4 assists for 7 points. It was a terrible, terrible season. He struggled mightily. In his second season, he played a full 81 games. He had 41 points, so he rocketed up to a half a point per game and played his way into the first ballot Hall of Fame kind of player. Also, Vincent Lecavalier. He struggled a little bit in his first season. He played 82 games and only had 28 points. But then in his second season, he had 80 games, 25 goals, 67 points. So the second season has the breakout trend here. Steven Stamkos also had a slow start to his career. His first season, his first 8 games, he only had 1 point. And it was a secondary assist. He went 0 for his first 7 and got an assist in Game 8 and scored in the following game. But his first 59 games were rough, man. He only had 26 points, which is less than half a point per game. But he figured it before the season ended. The final 20 games, he had 19 points. So 0.95 points per game. And, all three of these players went on to have, a Hall of Fame career, 100-point seasons, yada, yada, yada. So basically, the moral of the story is, if you have Hughes or Kakko, don't worry. They'll be fine. Maybe not so much this year. It's still super duper early. Remember, Stamkos took 8 games to get his first point, and he ended up the season with close to 40 points. So, hold on to these players for now. All right. And last but not least, the last thing I want to talk about on this podcast is Dynasty watch list gems. So here's 3 players who are like 1% or 0% Fantrax owned. They're a little bit down the road, probably undrafted, and widely available. So if you've got a rebuilding team, or if you've got some potential for, a long-term prospect on your roster, maybe you got a guy that you want to drop and you don't know who to add, here's some advice. Yegor Zamula is a defenseman who signed as a free agent with the Philadelphia Flyers in 2018. The 19-year-old Russian is got good size, 6'3", 176. He was invited to the Flyers on a tryout and impressed them so much, he signed a contract similar to Philip Myers, who is penciled as one of their top prospects right now. So in 17-18, he made his debut in North America after the import draft, playing with Regina. He split that season with Calgary. He had 18 points in 69 games, kind of meh. Remember, he's a defenseman. And then last year, 2018-19, he played the full season with Calgary and had 56 points in 61 games. That's when he signed as a free agent with the Flyers. And this year, he's back in the Dub, playing with Calgary for what will be his 3rd season in the Dub. And he's already got 10 points in 7 games, 4 goals and 6 assists. So big defenseman, offensive ability, kind of like what I'm seeing from him. The next player is Ottawa Senators prospect, another free agent, undrafted signee player, Parker Kelly. Center winger, coming out of the Dub, 6 foot, 183. In his 4 seasons in the WHL, he played 273 games and had 188 points. So he's not a prolific goal scorer, and he's played 2 games in the AHL this year and has yet to register a point. He stood out at the Sens rookie and development camps this summer and last. He's 2-time winner of the rookie camp hardest working player, and all the previous recipients of that have gone on to make it to the NHL, playing for the Sens. What I like about this guy is he's a really hard-working two-way player. Opponent players hate to play against him. He's a really aggravating player. He's very aggressive on the forecheck. Scored a nice goal in the preseason. Going in on goal, kind of lost his footing, was tripped up or whatever. He's sliding on his belly. He still gets a shot off and scored. He's got that sort of never quit mentality, or a motor that doesn't quit. And I really love those players. And even if they're not the most skilled players in the world, I still think they earn themselves a lot of opportunity based on their work ethic. And the coaches just love players like this. The interview I tweeted out about him from the Senators after development camp was the coach saying that he's the kind of player that you need on your team to win. So I like his chances of making the NHL in a bottom 6 role as a multi-cat roto league kind of player. And the last player to talk about today would be a player we talked about on the last episode a little bit with Julie. I'm really glad she brought him up, because I've been kind of watch listing and holding on and slow cooking this player on my fantasy team for some time now. And that's Carolina Hurricanes prospect David Cotton. He is in his senior year at Boston College right now. He's 22 years old. He's got good size. He's 6'2", 201. Carolina picked him kind of late in 2015, 6th round, 169th overall. And in 2 games, he's got 6 points so far this season. Last year, he had 39 games played, 23 goals, 13 assists for 36 points. He'll be turning pro next year. And last year and this year, there pretty much hasn't been a goal scored by Boston College that he didn't factor in on. In fact, this year, he's leading Boston College after 2 games with 6 points. His line mate, Julius Matila, has 6 points as well. Then it drops off, completely. Logan Hutsko has 2 points. Then there are 6 players, including Matt Boldy, that have 1 point, and no one else on that team has a point. So yeah, of course it's 2 games in, but it just goes to show you that David Cotton is the offensive driver on that team. It's going to be really interesting to see what he wants to do at the end of the season, if he wants to turn pro and jump in with Charlotte or even maybe the Canes for a little bit at the end of the season, depending on where each team is in the standings and how far Boston College goes and how late their season runs. But he certainly will, it's his final year, so if he doesn't play at the end of the season with either one of those teams, then it's pretty safe to say he's going to exercise his right to become a free agent. So there's a player that I think has got maybe a little bit of a shorter wait time than Zamula or Parker Kelly. Those guys are going to take some time cooking in the AHL. Zamula is 19. Kelly is 20, I think. I didn't write his age down. And Cotton's 22, so he's a little bit closer. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll try and get another one up pretty soon. I'm going to have Chris Wassel as my guest on a future episode, and we're going to do a mailbag episode. So if you have prospect questions, go ahead and fire them at me on Twitter. The Twitter handle here is at DPR_show. You can use the hashtag DPR, and I'll find your questions there. Or if you shoot them to the DPR Twitter account. You can also follow me on Twitter at Farling. And, if you enjoyed the episode, first of all, thank you very much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. Send me some feedback on Twitter. Subscribe to the podcast. Give it a 5-star button if you so choose. And we'll see you on the next show. Take her easy.